What's up, everyone? Happy New Year. Welcome to 2021, and this is the first video of the year. Now, today we're going to go down memory lane and talk about a time that I lost $20,000 in real estate. And I actually lost $20,000 on a house, and I didn't even buy it. I never even bought the house, and I lost 20 grand. So, like usually, I share with you all everything that I go through in the business, the good and the ugly. And I want to show you all the mistakes that I have made in the past, so you all don't have to make those same mistakes. So ride with me today. I'm going to show you all a property that I attempted to buy, and I lost 20 grand trying to buy the property. But before we go ahead and do me a favor. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Go ahead and like the video and leave a comment on something about the video, things that you liked, things that you learned, or even some recommendations. Now, again, I do this for you all, and I want you all to learn everything that I've learned in this business. So with no further ado, let's go. What's up, guys? All right, we're back. I hope you're ready for a good story, because I got a good story for you all. The story is about the time I lost $20,000 by making a bad decision in real estate. Yeah, like Jesus, I died on the cross so you don't have to. That was a joke. That was a joke. But no, seriously, I lost 20 grand, so you don't have to. So just listen up to this story. Now, I'm sitting outside of a property. I'm gonna show you all this property. Let me show it to you real quick. This is the property right here on the right behind this silver car. Regular townhouse. Now, this property, I never bought the property, but I lost a lot of money dealing with it. Now, what happened was, about 5 years ago, I was in my mid-20s. I had just started flipping houses. I was actually feeling good. I had flipped my first couple houses, feeling good, feeling great. So I'm saying, let's go to the auction. Let's start buying properties at the auction. So I go to the auction. Well, one thing about the auction is properties are advertised on the auction before you show up. So you know what properties are being advertised at the auction. So there were 4 properties that I was interested in. I couldn't afford all 4, but I wanted to get at least one of them. So the day before the auction, I drove to the properties. I drove to 3 of the properties just to check out the exterior. You can't get inside of them, but you can at least look at the exterior. So 3 of the properties looked good. I was feeling good about it. The 4th property was on the other side of town. So I was being lazy and I didn't go see that property. And that laziness cost me a lot of money. Now, the day of the auction, the next day, the first 3 properties, I didn't get them. I was outbid. But the 4th property, I was going back and forth with another buyer at the auction, and I actually won the bid for $300,000. Now, I knew the property was worth $600,000 fully renovated, so I was feeling good. Now, one thing about the auction is, when you win a property at the auction, you have to put down a big deposit right then and there, and it has to be a cashier's check. So I had to put $15,000 down right there at the auction. So I gave them a cashier's check for 15 grand. And then after I left, reality set in. And I said, you know what? I never saw the property. So I drove across town to go look at the property. And when I got there, my heart dropped out of my chest. I saw a little old lady sitting on the porch of the house. Now, one of my rules was I will not buy a property with tenants inside, because trying to get tenants out of a house is a nightmare. And that's just one of my rules. Now, let alone trying to get a tenant out that's a senior citizen. Yeah, good luck. So when I got there, I was really upset. Now, what I did was I got out of the car and I walked up to the lady and I introduced myself. I didn't tell her that I bought the property at the auction, but I just wanted to introduce myself and let her know that I was interested in the property. And I wanted to see, really, did she even know that the house was just sold? And she really didn't care, honestly. When I sat there, she was nice to me, but I had mentioned the house being sold at the auction, and she told me the whole story about what happened with the property. And she hadn't paid the mortgage in 10 years. And she hadn't paid the mortgage out of spite, because the mortgage company, they had did something to her a long time ago. And she, instead of paying the mortgage, she decided to just put the mortgage every month in escrow and not pay it to the mortgage company. So unfortunately, she lost the house. But the reason that was a problem for me was because she was still living in the house. So at the time, it wasn't a huge problem. It was just a matter of, okay, I'm gonna have to evict her. So the first thing I did was I called up an attorney. That was the first mistake. Well, no, that was the second mistake I made. The first mistake was not going to see the property to make sure it was vacant. The second mistake I made was calling the first attorney, or hiring the first attorney that I could get on the phone. And I hired the attorney initially to file eviction, but unfortunately, it was a bigger mess once we started running title on the house. Now, before you buy a property, you have to run title. When my title company ran title, they found that there were open lawsuits against the foreclosing bank. The bank that foreclosed on her, she had filed multiple lawsuits, open lawsuits, against the title of the property. Now, the reason that that's a huge problem is because I cannot get title insurance if there are lawsuits, open pending lawsuits against the title. There's no title company, there's no mortgage company, there's no bank that will give you any type of title insurance if there's open lawsuits. Now, this lady was very smart. She was clouding the title for years. Every time the courts would throw out one of her lawsuits, she would file another lawsuit. And she just was working the system. Unfortunately, she just kept working the system, and I got stuck in the middle of it. Now, once I hired my attorney, I had to pay him about $1,000 retainer just to represent me in this case. Now, I know you all are probably thinking, well, why didn't you just call the auction company and demand your money back? I did that, and they laughed. And then I called their attorneys, and they laughed, and they said, yeah, you're not getting your money back. When you buy a property at auction, it's 100% risk. You take the risk. Now, they said you can still buy the property, but you just gotta evict her. But the problem is, I told them, I said, I can't get title. I can't get title to the property. And then they showed me in the contract, somewhere deep in those auction contracts, that say you cannot get your deposit back. You have no remedy, even if you can't get marketable title. Yeah, it was stuffed somewhere in that contract that I signed. And that was my third mistake. Don't sign anything without reviewing it. Ever. Ever. So that was my third mistake. And unfortunately, I was dragged through this whole legal battle between this lady and the bank. And this went on for, I believe, a year and a half. I was involved in this for a year and a half. This little old lady, she had a mission, and she was not going to get out of her house. I did everything I could. I approached her multiple times, tried to explain to her that I'm just the innocent victim here. You know, I had no clue that she was in the house. I had no clue anything about the foreclosure, and I wasn't involved in that. But I'm here now, and I was asking her if she would be willing to take my help and move out, considering she's probably going to lose the house eventually, Whether I'm involved or whether somebody else is involved, she's going to lose the house. It's already been sold at auction. But she was not willing to take my help. I called her family members, tried to talk reason into them. They weren't having it. I tried everything I could, until the point to where she served me a cease and desist letter telling me to stay away from her family, the house, everything. Now, I wasn't being a stalker or nothing. I'm just being a businessman. I'm just trying to protect my, at the time, it was $15,000. And then I had paid another $1,000 to my attorney. And then over the year and a half, I paid more attorney fees, because every time she went to court against the foreclosing bank, my attorney had to show up and I had to pay for my attorney being there. So I was about $20,000 in a year and a half later. And the moment the courts finally threw out her bogus lawsuit, she filed 2 more lawsuits in Superior Court. And once that happened, I just gave up. I put my hands up in the air and just said, you know what? It's been almost 2 years now. This $15,000 or $20,000 at this point, I don't foresee me getting that money back at this point. I would have to at that time, I had fired my attorney. Now, let me tell you about my attorney. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want him trying to come after me for slander or defamation or whatever, any of that stuff. But at the end of the day, he was weak. He was really weak. He just plain sucked. He didn't represent me. He didn't fight for me. He literally, all he was a middleman to communicate what was going on to me. And I'm sitting here telling him that, hey man, I have almost $20,000 at risk here. I need you to fight so I can get out of this. I don't even care about buying the house anymore. I just want my money back. And he wouldn't fight to get my money back. So it got to the point where I just fired him. And at this point, I'm 20 grand in, and I had to ask myself, how much am I willing to lose? And how deep down this rabbit hole am I willing to go? And I just looked up to God and I said, you know what? I'm gonna just walk away. It was a lesson learned. Don't ever buy a property at auction without seeing it. Don't ever hire a weak attorney. Get some references, some referrals, all of that. Properly vet your attorney, because you never know how good or bad they are. All attorneys are not made equal, for real. So I learned a lot of lessons going through that situation. I really did feel bad for her to some degree, because she was being forced out of her house. She had somewhat of an argument 10 years ago when the bank did do something corrupt. It was during the big mortgage crisis. The mortgage company did some predatory lending type stuff to her. But to not pay your mortgage for 10 years and think that you're not going to be forced out, that's very naive. Man, let me tell you one thing about Washington, D.C. Oh, by the way, we're in Washington, D.C. I didn't even tell y'all where we're at. We're in Washington, D.C. We're in Northeast. Riggs Park is the neighborhood we're in. A very residential neighborhood, very strong black neighborhood, still very black. I know people talk about D.C. being gentrified. Fort Totten and Riggs Park, still very, very black out here. But I did feel bad about the situation, her being forced out, because, you know, she was like my grandmother's age, and she was a senior citizen. And, you know, she grew up in the neighborhood. She lived in that house for almost 50 years. And I felt bad that she was being forced out. But at the end of the day, I had my money tied up in the house. And I wish I knew she was living there, because I never would have bought the property. If I had just showed up the day before and saw her car parked out front and all of her window chimes and all of her stuff sitting on the front porch, I would have never bid on the property, because that would have told me that she was living in, someone was living in that house. And I will not buy property if there's a tenant or a homeowner inside. So that was a lesson that I learned. $20,000 down the toilet. That's money that I will never get back. Now, fortunately, I was able at least to write that off as a loss on my taxes. But nobody wants to lose $20,000. You know, $20,000 is a lot of money. Even to this day, $20,000 to me is a lot of money. And to just lose 20 grand, especially on a house that you never even purchased, whew. You know, if that was my first experience in real estate, it would be enough to make me never want to buy any piece of real estate ever, to lose $20,000. But, you know, there's going to be good years, there's going to be bad years. That year was a very bad year for me. I bought a lot of properties that year, and I lost a lot of money on some of those properties because I didn't do my due diligence. So if anything, any message that you all can learn from this video is do your due diligence. Do not think that just because a property looks like it's a deal doesn't mean it's a deal. Make sure you run your numbers. Make sure you look at the comps. Make sure you reach out to realtors if you're not a realtor to get an opinion on the neighborhood, to get an opinion on the resale value. Make sure you have contractors give you a realistic price on construction. Make sure you do your due diligence. Now, another thing that you can do is, especially for auction properties, is build a relationship with a title company and ask them to run title on certain properties that come up for auction before the auction. The auction properties are advertised in most cases well before the auction. So you can have a title company run a preliminary title search on the property just to see if there's going to be any headaches. If I had title ran on this property before the auction, I would have seen the lawsuits and I would have definitely never bought the property. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I learned a big lesson that day, or that whole year and a half I was dealing with that property. The funny thing is I ended up buying another property right down the street, and I ended up flipping that. And I was working on that property as I was waiting on this property to come out of litigation, and it never did. And I ended up looking at the sales on this property, ended up selling about a year ago. So for 4 years, this lady stayed in that house. I don't know who she sold it to, but it looks like it's the same property, same condition it was for the most part back when I was going to buy it. So, all right, y'all, that was my story. Just wanted to share that with you all. One thing that I do want to mention is if you missed my live with Nicole and I, we went live last Thursday, January 5th or 6th. Now, every Thursday, we're going to go live at 7 p.m. and we're going to be talking about real estate. So if you aren't a part of my Instagram, if you don't follow me on Instagram, please go to my Instagram. It's Vernon Bond CEO. Nicole and I, we go live every Thursday. We're going to be talking about real estate. If you're interested in wholesaling, if you're interested in flipping, if you're interested in being a realtor or even being a landlord, every week we discuss something different and talk about real estate. Last week we talked about wholesaling, and we talked about how to get into the business and how you should grow your business the right way. So please check us out on our live. If you are interested in getting into wholesaling, go to 400K Blueprint. It's our real estate course. We worked on it all of last year. It's a really good course. It shows you how to wholesale in today's market. It's a no BS course. It's not the old school way of wholesaling with the bandit signs and the direct mail. It's the new school digital way of wholesaling. You can wholesale wherever you're at, whether you're in Washington, D.C. or Las Vegas. It doesn't matter. The process is the same wherever you go. So check the course out. It's a really dope course. And that's about it. So hopefully you all learned from my mistakes. Don't go out here buying properties at auction without checking them out. Please don't do that, because you may lose a lot of money. All right, guys. I'll holler at y'all later. Peace.